Hi, welcome to my review of Xiu Xiu Plays the Music of Twin Peaks. Xiu Xiu, experimental rock band, been around for 2 decades, playing a cover album of songs from the hit TV show Twin Peaks, been around for, I think, 3 decades at this point. So anyways, we're taking the soundtrack of Twin Peaks, which is already pretty experimental in and of itself. I guess it sort of helped to popularize dream pop. It came out around the same time as Cocteau Twins. So it's already a slightly, I would say not slightly, but pretty experimental at points, even on the original soundtrack album. We already have this experimental TV score being played by a very, very experimental out there band, Xiu Xiu. You listen to most of their stuff, and it's... Considering this album, if I'm going to think of it on a holistic level, I think there are 3 major compliments I would give to it, and 2 major fallings. And I think all of those are contained in one song. Now that song is Blue Hink / Pink Room. Now, my first compliment, great source material. And I think the song exemplifies it because it's a combination of two great songs from Twin Peaks already, which is already a very, very legendary show with a very celebrated score. So good on them for choosing to cover a Twin Peaks soundtrack instead of any other TV show soundtrack. Second, it's very interesting track list and very interesting what songs they decide to use, what songs they didn't decide to use. So, as I said already, this is a combination of 2 different songs, but I was not aware even of the existence of Blue Hink. I don't believe it shows up in the show. If it does, shows up maybe once or twice. But Blue Hink is an alternate version, or a earlier version, or just a different version of Pink Room, which is one of the best songs on Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, the movie prequel soundtrack. And it's sort of an alternate version. And so this Blue Hink / Pink Room, it sort of combines the 2 together, because I believe they are in different keys, and they have different compositions, even though they are pretty similar in a lot of senses. And so it's combining different elements from one of them into elements of the other one. And so it kind of creates this whole new song by taking these 2 pre-existing ones. And sort of how it does tie in, you see this happen a lot, they choose a lot of songs I'd never heard of. I thought they were original songs, honestly, until I found out later that they pulled them from the deep archives of music they use that wasn't ever officially released until very recently. They were taking these songs, which were not any of the original soundtracks, and they're pulling them and repurposing them to use in their album, which I think is very admirable, very interesting idea to do. If you're going to do a covers album, obviously don't do the original track list, or even a combination of things. You want to have something original to make your own vision. I really respect that from them. The third compliment I would level on the album, I think the thing it does probably the best at the end of the day, is the creativity in a lot of these different interpretations and the originality with how they approach things. So on Pink Room / Blue Hink, they keep the instrumental palette similar. I don't know if there isn't really a cello, which is kind of heavy in the original 2 tracks, but it's still mostly a guitar-driven track at the end of the day. But the way they changed a pretty low-brow, kind of low-key, somewhat heavy, and turn it everything up to 11 and flip things on its head, and just totally change around different tones entirely to create its own unique aesthetic and your own unique feeling is super interesting to look into. And as an original fan of the show and of the soundtrack, you can there's new things for you to pick up on and new things for you to analyze. These sort of creative liberties that are taken on and sort of new ways of looking at the original soundtrack, which is already so iconic, with both the track list and just the interpretations of the song, which flip them on their head. I think these are really important to creating a cohesive and unique experience that allows this to stand on its own as its own work in total. And the album would not work if it wasn't as creative or as out there or as original as it is. Okay, now I'll give it my 3 compliments. My 2 major criticisms of both the album and this song in particular. One, it would have to be just sort of the listener fatigue that happens over listening through it. At points it feels so lo-fi and so heavy at a lot of points, and it seems you're given very few relinquishments from the heavy, incredible distortion. And the fact that it is a pretty long track list at the end of the day And there's like, it feels just also just the quality of the sound in general. It feels very grating on just the ear. Sometimes you feel like you have to like turn it down. Like it's like I mean, this happens with a lot of noise projects, but I feel like how this is kind of like a tape on a tape sort of makes it sort of weary, like kind of almost hurts to listen to after a while. That's not a major critique. I've listened to things that are probably more abrasive than this. And it's not like obviously that comes with the massive creativity and making it super interesting. Now, my major second criticism would be, at the end of the day, that I believe a lot of the interpretations and just the overall aesthetic that they go for in this album are less interesting portrayals of the feelings and emotions that the original soundtrack and the original score came up with. So, I mean, if you've seen the TV show, I'm not going to like spoil a lot of things, but it has its own it's probably Lynch's most iconic work. David Lynch is the director of the TV show and just a famous film director. He's known for the phrase Lynchian. And the show sort of like captures that aesthetic perfectly and captures so many different like feelings and moods, so evocative of so many things when you look at just the overall town. And I feel like this album, like the fact that it's so off-kilter and unapologetically off-kilter, makes sort of the feelings and emotions they're trying to portray throughout less interesting overall. And this isn't to say it's too weird of an album or something like that, but I do think the fact that it is trying to frame itself as part of like a Twin Peaks sort of thing, when Twin Peaks is sort of about the balance between you see mostly the good, but there is like a breeding underbelly, to show only the breeding underbelly and make it as weird as possible. And maybe you see like the beauty relinquished sometimes out of the pure like desolation. Well, I think that is interesting, but I don't think it's as interesting as the original portrayals, and that would probably be my most major criticism. Again, I still really do love this album. The interpolation or cover, I guess, of Falling on this record is incredible. It's just so explosive, and it sounds so. I mean, I think it rivals. I think it stands on its own, maybe like on the same caliber as the original song, which is just a huge compliment. And it just like blows me away every time I hear it, just how emotional and just how foreboding it is. Like that, I think, is a super interesting portrayal of the themes in there. But I don't feel like we get that with I don't think we get that with very many songs. I don't think we see sort of the beauty and the horror at the same time. I think it's usually just showing mostly the horror. But again, I still do like the album. Laura Palmer's theme is also really good on this. One other major criticism, though, is I do not like Josie's Past, the final closing song. I do respect the diary entry they read on there. Not to spoil anything of the album, but they read a diary entry, and that is actually from an official book about the TV show. But I feel like the way the diary is delivered is... I don't like the voices that's used there. I feel like it takes away from the impact, and I don't feel like it doesn't feel like it's coming from Laura Palmer, the character who reads the diary entry, or is supposed to be reading it. Just the way it's like being delivered, like, I don't know, it rubs you the wrong way. Great album. End of the day, my score probably is 7.5. I'll just put 7.5. Great record. I think you should listen to it if you're a fan of the show, or if you're just a fan of Xiu Xiu. Great album, blah, blah, blah. I love